of the first things you did when you got to WWF, apart from commentate with Jim Ross, was when the Invasion storyline was happening, and ECW became a part of that, and it lasted about 5 months, something like that. How did you feel as someone who had, like we talked about before, so much time with ECW? You're now in WWF, and they're bringing the name of ECW back to do this storyline, and it culminates in Survivor Series where the alliance is taken away. But a few days before that show, you did that promo on SmackDown on Vince McMahon. It was like 11 minutes long. I think people remember it, where you said things like, you took Hulk Hogan's blood and created Titan Tower, whatever it was. It felt like that was almost like a culmination for you to vent that and get that all out in some way. Would that be accurate?
For those of you who will remember the Monday Night Raw that preceded that promo, they did a vignette on Vince's plane with Mick Foley, where Mick Foley tore into Vince and Vince was just eating fruit and not paying attention to what Mick had to say. And Mick laid some pretty heavy on Vince, and Vince just blew it off and ignored him, in terms of, well, this is the way things are, and I don't give a what your opinion is. And we were heading to SmackDown, and Michael Hayes, the fabulous Freebird, WWE Hall of Famer, I might add, and author of Bad Street USA, Nibes. Michael Hayes on the plane looked over at Vince and says, if you really want someone to do a shoot promo on you, Paulie over there rip your yay wide. And, the alliance had just been such a unmitigated disaster for all of us involved. Both, again, I was on the writing team and on camera at the time. So on both ends of my career, it's just like, oh God, I wish this would just end already. And it was ending, and we were heading towards the conclusion, and Vince just looks, Vince is on the plane. And the funny thing was, just like with Mick Foley, he was legitimately just sitting there, eating fruit or something, just goes over and goes, want to rip me yay wide? And figuratively, not literally. And, it had been a while since I had done one of those ECW-style shoot promos. Do you want me to rip you an asshole yay wide? As this guy over here found out, I'm the guy to do it. You want me to shoot? I'll shoot. Okay. How far can I go? As much as you can to draw me money. Okay. That I can do. That I can do. I can draw you money and rip you yay wide. Let's do it. And we got to SmackDown, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of a bunch of the promoters that he ran out of business, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of his father because I knew his father. I worked for his father. I was a teenage photographer that used to get paid for my pictures by Vince McMahon's father, and so I felt I had the right to invoke his father's name, which is a no-no unless you're going to say his name with reverence. We had done the angle where I turned Vince's children, and we've done it 100,000 times since, but this was I turned both of them on Vince at the same time. Where Stephanie comes out on TV and goes, I just want my father to die! And okay, so we're going with the death of the father from at the behest of the daughter, with the endorsement of the son, and I said, okay, let's see how far I can take this. And the only thing that stuck in my head was sports entertainment versus wrestling. Sports entertainment versus wrestling. That if I can just get that hook in, people will really go, Heyman is shooting on Vince McMahon. And so I came up with the line, you made wrestling a dirty word, didn't you, Vince? And I went, wow, that's the core. And as long as I can build this promo around that core, I have no idea what I'm going to say out there, but I know that's the message I want to send. That ECW and, WCW, the Alliance represents wrestling, and you scumbag, barrel-chested Irish You represent sports entertainment. You want superstars. We want wrestlers, you know? And that's the core of it. So to his credit, I'll give him a ton of credit. I went up to Vince halfway through the day and I said, do you even want to know what I'm, you know, some of the I want to say to you? And he went, no, draw me money, you know? Okay, are you going to say anything back to me? No, just draw me money, you know? And, you know, and we came up with the idea of Taz choking me out at the end, you know, because Taz was no longer really in the ring, and he was sitting at the commentator table, and I just looked, you know, and I just looked at him at the time as this big fat butterball sitting with Michael Cole that used to be the toughest guy in, brother, I'll choke you out. I'm Taz, I'm from Brooklyn, you know? And now he's just, you know, and the line was, and now you've reduced him to being just a commentator and not a good one at that. You know? You know, and then I just told Taz, I said, you know the cue, don't you? And he goes, no. I said, oh, you'll know it when I get to you. You know? And I said to him, listen, the cameras are going to be tight on us, you know, bring that choke, man, you know, tighten it up, bring it in. Oh, God, did he bring it? Oh, he choked the shit out of me. And God bless him for doing it. So we were in Gorilla, and I was about to go out to cut the promo, and I looked over at Vince, who's eating a protein bar, and I said, hey, you sure you don't want to know anything I'm going to say here? Some of this shit's real heavy. Will it draw me money? Yeah. It'll get a lot of attention, Vince, that I promise you. It's the go-home show, goddammit. Bring it. Yes, sir, Captain. I'm on my way. And so I went out there, and for however many minutes it was, I laid into Vince McMahon in a shoot as I recommend anybody that ever wants to do a shoot promo, keep in mind the fact that shooting in and of itself is very Vince Russo. It does not work. No one here wants to just hear me shoot. I can shoot all night long, and you'll sit there and go, this is what who gives a shit? But if I can turn that shoot into storyline context and then manipulate what you're listening to into making you want to buy a ticket, to where I take that shoot and I make you say, you know, he did make wrestling a dirty word. You know what? He did make superstars when I want to see wrestlers. He did do. F him, man. I'm going to buy that pay-per-view because I want those guys to win. Now that shoot draws money. So we took this realistic premise, which is known as a shoot, and we went as far as we could with the shoot comments, manipulated them into the storyline that we were presenting for that Sunday, and set forth a segment on SmackDown that to this day, as you just learned from Kenny, I still get asked all about because people still wonder, how was that planned? What did Vince know? How much was scripted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it still intrigues people to this day, which is the design of what they call the shoot promo. Shoot promos are not supposed to be, hey man, I know that your wife cheated on you and that your third kid ain't really your kid. And people at home go, I don't give a shit. I want to see two guys fight. But if you make that promo something that people can feel in their hearts, and it strikes their passion, you know, the Bubba Ray Dudley always says, strike a chord, man. Strike a chord on somebody and you'll sell a ticket. You strike a chord, sell a ticket. And that's what we tried to do. And to Vince's credit, he took a ferocious promo said to his face with some I don't think a lot of people have ever said to him. And he took it so that he could draw money, and he didn't share a lot of that money with me when the buy rate came in, because in his mind he probably thought, oh, you got your payday by being able to say that to me. was an incident on the airplane with me and Vince after the December to Dismember. The December to Dismember was the worst pay-per-view presentation I have ever. I've ever had nightmares about. It sucked. The show just was a brutal abomination of the concept of wrestling, sports entertainment, pay-per-view television. The human existence was set back in time by how deplorable of a show this was. We were all together involved in a show that could not have been presented in a worst possible fashion, that if you wanted to sabotage your own business, your own legacy, your own wrestlers, your own cameramen, your own pay-per-view industry, a publicly traded company, and all those involved in it, you couldn't have written it this good to f yourself up. And the one that got dismembered in that December is the schmuck sitting in the chair right here. It just sucked. It was such a horrible show. And I was very pissed off about it because most of the things that the public rebelled against this show were things that I were sending memos about, saying, we better not do this because of this. Please don't do this because of this. Let's not do this. Listen, this is just going to backfire. Let's not do this. And I had a concept that I was too passionate, admittedly, too passionate about, in which I either wanted, if Bobby Lashley were to become the champion, I wanted him to, relax, I wanted him to become the champion as a heel, in which we'd get to WrestleMania, and I wrote this out, by the way. I wrote out December to Dismember to WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley would end up in WrestleMania against Rob Van Dam against CM Punk. Three-way match. If they didn't like that pitch, I had a program from December to Dismember to WrestleMania, Bobby Lashley versus Rob Van Dam, and I had Bobby Lashley versus CM Punk. I had CM Punk versus Rob Van Dam with the winner facing Bobby Lashley. I had all these different scenarios. Okay, I also offered a way for Rob Van Dam to win the title, and he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley, or he'd go to WrestleMania against CM Punk, or he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley and CM Punk. And then I had the bright idea of pitching to Vince, why don't we have Punk, who's the new star that everybody seems to be rallying around, why don't we have Punk choke out the Big Show in the first 4 minutes of the match, so that now you know we're going to have a new World Heavyweight Champion in this match, and why don't we put the title on Punk, since everybody seems to be falling in love with this kid. And every one of the scenarios that I pitched, who was the first guy eliminated in that match? Punk. Who was the second? Van Dam. And it seemed awful spiteful to me. And Vince and I were butting heads, and I wanted out anyway. I couldn't stand what was being done to the version of ECW. I felt like I had hoarded out my own legacy. I didn't want to represent their version of ECW anymore. I just wanted to go home. And to be fair, Vince wanted me to go home too. And he sure made sure that I did. So what happened on that plane was, to avoid your question with all due respect, what happened on that plane was the culmination of me knowing Vince and Vince knowing me since I was 15 years old. He's never went public with what happened on that plane. And because it was between me and him, and by the way, there was no sex involved or anything like that. There's nothing salacious involved. Because, I mean, and no, I didn't kick his ass because I can't. And no, he didn't kick my ass because he didn't. But it was a very heated personal argument between the two of us once the plane landed and everybody else got off the plane. And it was time for me to go home. Now, as I told Steve Austin, there were two people in the company. You know, the old cowboy western Clint Eastwood, John Wayne thing. This town ain't big enough for the two of us. One is, you know, the New York Jew boy sitting in front of you, former owner of ECW, and the other was the majority owner, majority shareholder, chairman of the board, CEO, COO, head writer, and ultimate boss and god of his own universe, who owned at the time, I believe, 97.8% of the voting shares of the company. Now, I don't know how your math goes, and mine wasn't A+ in college, but it wasn't that far. But in my mathematical equation, if one of us is going to be shown the door, ain't gonna be him. So that was it. I was gone. I couldn't take it anymore. And I went home, and they were more than happy to send me home, by the way, especially after the things that I said to him on the plane. But I don't want to ever violate a confidence that I think remained between me and Vince, because we're the only two people on this planet who truly know what was said on that plane. And because of that, until he wants to go public with it, I don't want to. I think that's between me and Vince.